Once I tweet out these links, we should be. Yes, we are live. Fantastic. So today I'm
Yep,
with
we live.
Ace. We certainly are live. I'm with Ace for a bit of a chat about politics, capitalism, things that are happening in the world right now, and a bit more. How are you today, Ace?
I'm good. Just good to be here. Good to be debating you. You've been such a gracious host last time. And it's just good to be back.
That's very kind. If anyone who caught the previous stream, previous stream from 2 ago that I did, we had a bit of a group discussion at the end, which
Hmm.
Ace was a part of.
Yeah,
We said we were going to go over.
yeah,
Beg your
yeah.
pardon, sorry.
I didn't really like that part. Whatever you like, got everyone up in here, but I don't know. I think it kind of what's that word I'm saying? I'm trying to look for. I don't know. It just went a little bit chaotic. But yeah,
Often happens, doesn't it? But through chaos, reason can be found, and hopefully we'll find some reason today.
mhm.
S- so we're going to have a little chat about politics and such. And so
Yep.
at the end of the last stream, and sort of one of the themes about it, as we were talking about fascism and such, there was a bit of a discussion about left and right wing politics and government control and sort of
Mhm.
a theme of what it is to be in a society with authoritarianism and such. And I think the point was made about the sort of the capitalist society that we're in at the moment, and people have different approaches and perspectives on it. But I don't want to put words in your mouth. I put
Yeah.
capitalism in the title. Ace, what would you say is your perspective on this element of it,
Well,
of life?
first thing first, let's try to define capitalism to the best of our ability. I would say the individual, hold up, the individual has control over the means of production instead of, let's say, the state or the group. It solely falls on that individual. So that individual gets the capital, gets the building. He puts his money into this property to build it up, and then he goes sells whatever he produces for a profit. Um, and we engage in free and voluntary trade. And like one thing to that's important with capitalism is the NAP, the non-aggression principle, which clearly states that I do not have a right to aggress on you or your property. So that would be a violation, and if I were to aggress on you to either force you to buy a product or take your money in some type of way, I would be in the wrong.
Okay, so a lot of
And
things to. Oh,
you
sorry,
know,
you're gonna.
I think, and I think
What was that?
that we all could be in favor of the NAP. You know, I don't like anyone forcing their will on you, Owen. I wouldn't want that. Um, I guess that would be like the definition I would give.
Okay. So there's a lot there which in the sort of definition, the sort of etymology, I can sort of see myself agreeing with. The idea that any individual has the right to accumulate their own capital, the right to be able to pursue their economic interest on the free
Mhm.
markets, to trade said goods and capitalized elements, commodities, even with others to try and gain their wealth, to make a profit and such, to try and be the most successful capitalist in their industry or their markets, and thus have the wealth to sort of show for it. Would you say that sort of is what you were saying?
Yeah, and like one thing about like success, I think success it looks different for each individual. Um, Success for me might be completely different from yours. You know, me being successful is just me having a small house and a car that'll go from point A to point B as efficient as possible. I mean, your success might look like you know a collection of some sort.
I agree. There's definitely different examples of
Hmm.
what people are going to view as success. But where we start to see a problem, I think, with this, because we both sort of largely agree on what we've just defined there, right? That the freedom to accumulate capital is that
Hmm.
there's no specifics about what this sort of freedom really is. It's in capitalism, it's whatever you can commodify, right? Like if you can see the business avenue, then you have the right to be able to pursue it. And so, in theory, that's sort of making products that fit the needs of the market, right? Like the person who says, okay, well, cars are great, but what if we could travel faster? Let's invent a plane. This shirt I'm wearing is great, but maybe it's a bit warm. Let's invent a nicer material that's a bit more bit more aerated, a bit more breathable. So, in
Hmm.
principle, it's sort of the you can sort of, or in principle, in theory, you can imagine people thinking, yeah, let's use this as a tool to get the best innovations on the market and such. But in practice, in the sort of the way that the system has developed over time, we've seen that actually the things that get commodified are things used to take power over others. So, food, for instance, we might see food as, I mean, would you say food is a human right? The access to food is something that every human should have on the planet?
I wouldn't necessarily call it a right. I would call it a need. Because, like I said,
Okay,
we all
well,
need food. It's
we definitely do. We need food.
just, um, do I have a right to come into your house and take your food away from you?
Well, we can come on to that in a minute. I mean, obviously, no. We can come on to that in a second,
Okay.
though. But we can agree that food is a human. Humans need food to live, right? And water and all the other things.
Yeah.
We'll focus on food for a second. We need food to live. Otherwise, we don't get the nutrition we need. Our bodies won't develop and sustain themselves, and we'll die. So we have something which is vital to human survival. But a capitalist commodifies this food. It turns it into a business venture, seizes control of a significant portion of the food producing capacities of society, be it the farms, be it the transportation networks, be it the shops that the food is sold in the markets, um, and then turns them into their instruments of business. And what this does is that obviously it's producing a profit for them. They're able to, through various stages of the food production network, make a profit from the operations that take place. But this profit is derived from processes which we need to survive. There's no opting out of it. We can't choose to not engage in this practice. If we don't have food, then we'll starve. So we're
Hmm.
forced by this process to give our money to participate in the market for the benefit of these capitalists, and that rather contradicts the idea of what you were just saying then about not having our food taken away from us, not aggressing onto others, not forcing anyone to be trading with others. That is entirely contradicted by this, because if you don't participate in this trade, then you're going to die. You have to you have to have access to food, otherwise you'll starve. So already there's something a little bit questionable about the idea that there's a capitalist system which is voluntary, because if you don't participate in the things that they have control of, we're going to meet a pretty sordid end.
Well, I mean, yeah, if you do have if you do have the house and land yourself, I mean, you could always grow vegetable or grow fruits and vegetables. But yeah, I mean, like, if you have something I want and I need, the only fair thing to do is to go up to you, ask if you are willing to spare something, or see about trading with you. And
So, I mean,
maybe,
I get what you're saying. Oh, sorry, you're gonna say some more then. Sorry.
yeah, maybe maybe work 15, 20 minutes on your uh yard for something, but me and
But
you,
again, though, Ace. Sorry,
okay,
keep going. Sorry, I can't.
yeah, but me and you, we had to come up with an agreement. It's either you give me the food free of charge, or you ask me, do X, Y, Z. I'll give you this. But
But Ace,
I just
the
think,
agreement is a little bit. It's not, the deal is loaded though, right? Because the person selling the food isn't like you and I. Like we're not
mhm,
some sort of average member of society. They're a mega corporation. They have a revenue in the billions, and so
yeah,
because they have all of this, they've got considerably more resources for us and can afford for us not to spend their money there. But we need to engage with their practice and other corporations' practices because, like I said a second ago, if we don't have the food that they're selling, how are we going to eat and survive? How are we going to exist as a person? So it's an entirely loaded trade because there's no, one of the parties is clearly more able to to negotiate the terms, which is why food is always sold for a profit, and why people, even when they don't agree with the pricing of basic amenities, still have to go and take their business there. I want to come back to something you said though, just before I let you respond. You said that someone could grow their own vegetables, or someone could walk a little
yeah.
bit and do their own sort of food production. And I would ask, do you think that's realistic for the urbanized populations of the Western world? Do you think that people who are already renting, say, because as well as the food being commodified, housing and land and gardening tools are also on the market and disproportionately controlled
I
by
mean,
wealthy
like,
parties?
I would believe that it is doable for certain individuals.
Some individuals definitely,
It's gonna
but
be like, could everyone do it? Like if you're in a big city, like probably not. If you're more in like a rural area, no,
exactly. So like if you're,
maybe like uh, I see somebody with land, uh, hey, let me plant a few things in your yard. I'll give you X amount for letting me use your land.
well, exactly, like it's not something which is going to be feasible if you don't have access to vegetable arable land, which unfortunately is many people, not just the US but most developed nations. um, but again, even if you did have the access, unfortunately, land is also commodified. It's also something which is bought and
Yeah.
sold for a profit on the market. So, like that trade you just suggested a second ago, where you say, okay, well, I'm going to let you use the land, and then in return, I'll give you some of the proceeds of what I sell, is entirely weighted to the person that is renting or letting the land, because what, like if you have control of this vast plot of land, you have the weighted advantage of being able to determine how much you can take from the person letting it from you. Because if if you're the landlord, say, you have control of something that the other person needs to survive. So there's a clear financial advantage, and as we see, the person in charge of the land can then take a massive portion of the proceeds that are made from it, which in this case is a good chunk of the money you'd make selling the food in the first place. And I think that the sort of this is even before we introduced the idea that people don't have the time to like loads of people would love to spend time gardening and sort of being more invested in their own food production cycles and such, but they can't, because as well as having to pay for things like food and a house, they also have electricity bills, they've got transport needs, they've got all sorts of stuff going on, which makes it just entirely unfeasible to be able to dedicate time to growing food just to be able to not have to go to the supermarket selling you upmarketed, priced up food, which is the whole point. The freedom that capitalism is supposedly giving us is a faux freedom. It's false, because as soon as we introduce the material reality of the system, the vast majority of people are just never going to see that freedom. That's why people criticize it. That's why it's not something which I favor.
So, what would you say would be a better solution?
A better solution? Okay,
Yeah.
so in terms of food, for instance, rather than having a handful of corporations being in control of basically the entire food network of the planet, you would democratize it. You would have worker representation at every single stage of the system, and critically, the revenue that is generated, the sort of the fruits of the labor, also being shared amongst people and distributed equitably. And then that way, you'd be able to feed everyone. You would take out the need for people to slave away, having to make ends meet just to afford a basic meal. And with that human right guaranteed, you'd be able to see people put their efforts into things they'd rather be doing and things to improve society. If people weren't as stressed about having to afford their bills and afford their living costs, they'd be so much more productive and so much more contributing to societal progress, and critically, happier, healthier people that aren't dying of starvation mere a stone throw away from a supermarket for their food. So a worker-owned system, to answer your question more succinctly.
So just so I'm clear, do you think you would call yourself a socialist or a communist?
I mean, there's lots of discussion about those terms. I would say probably somewhere in the socialist ballpark, but communism is sort of a few steps along, right? So someone that is anti-capitalist and wanting justice and sees that justice as left-wing. And by left-wing, we're talking about deconstructing the hierarchies. So in this case, the capitalist has the power over the majority of people in society, over working people, because they control food as a commodity, and people need food to survive. So the person that is able to buy and sell food to people in the millions is clearly disproportionately powerful over the average person who relies on said capitalists' trading options to be able to survive. So that's what we're criticizing, that unjust power dynamic that exists between the person who's in control of food and the rest of society.
So quick question. So let's say I build up a supermarket with my own money. Let's just say I got a loan, or or let's just say I was left an inheritance by my parents. So it's like I go in and build a supermarket. and I hired these workers. Then I take it we would have the government to step in and enforce this collective ownership.
I think we're slightly misreading the way that this sort of alternative system would work. So it's
Okay.
not the case that it wouldn't be the case that one person is in charge of an entire supermarket, right? Or like the financial beneficiary of a supermarket, because really the term supermarket comes from the capitalist expansion of resources anyway, right? Like the idea that the Walmart family, for instance, right? Like the Walmart family, who owns Walmart? I forget the current owner. The Waltons. There we go.
Yeah.
A billionaire family, just tons of resources at their disposal. Clearly, they have a considerable fortune to spend on their resources. So when we have an alternative system, we say, okay, this money hasn't come from nowhere. They weren't born just inherently wealthy. This comes through a network of exploitation and worker capitalist relations, which allow them to control these resources. So every item in that supermarket, for instance, so be it the food, be it clothes, be it anything you can think of, has come via the production of workers' labor. People have put time in to make all these things, and then in a fairer system, they would be compensated for that. And that is sort of, it often is viewed literally in terms of money, but in an ideal system, that's something as simple as ensuring that person has a house, has a home, has education, has things they need to survive, and they're not expected to have to pay someone a
Yeah.
profitable sum for it. What's that?
So like I'm currently in the working class right now. I got a 9 to 5 job. I work outside all day, every day. But like me personally, like I am compensated for the time I put in to my job. So it's like,
But your compensation. So I'll come on to that because it'll be interesting to talk about it in a second, actually. But on the point of the supermarket,
okay.
the the reason when we talk about sort of governments and such, a socialist system's governing bodies govern as a verb, right? Like to sort of administer, to control, to adjudicate, to make people act in a way in accordance with what is just and right and such. That governing is different to what we see in today's society for a multitude of reasons, but critically, in a socialist system, it's not like a state government. It's like worker cooperation and community and democracy organization together. So the supermarket wouldn't exist as a profitable business venture because the entire model of making profit from someone is being done away with. Instead, we're seeing the supermarket as a distributor of things that people need, as managed by communities, and thus not something that you would start up yourself by yourself to try and become a billionaire, because how those billions are produced by taking what someone else has done and getting selling it on for more or exploiting them through the conditions of the market. Like it's not as though Walmart became billionaires by being great inventors. They took thousands of things that other people have done through the conditions of a market that we again started with. The workers who have produced the food didn't do so because they were fairly agreeing to trade their labor experience. They did so because if they didn't, they'd starve, right? So evidently, for the Walton family to become billionaires, it's required thousands of exploitative deals like that, like this one, to generate that wealth. And so what the socialist system does is challenge that and say, no, okay, this isn't a fair way of doing things. If we're going to have distribution systems, they need to be democratic and not operated at a profit. But to come on to what you said about not feeling compensated, and you don't have to answer this question too specifically if you don't want to, reveal like where you work or whatever. But like your job, like what sort of, is it for a corporation? Are you sort of an independent sort of, like what's your what would you say? What sort of employment are you in?
Let's just say it's a branch. It's a branch off the oil field.
So you a branch of an oil field, so like you're working like an energy production.
Yeah, pretty much. I just I mainly like paint equipment.
Okay, like paint, like protective paint, right? Like to stop it from rusting as quickly, or like
Yeah,
things
pretty
to.
much.
Okay, so I'm sure, I'm very glad that you feel compensated and such, and like in a sense, like you have been compensated because that your labor has gone into making these machines, and as a result, you get a paycheck from the company, right? But
Yeah, and
at the same,
another thing I would like to add is like whenever you say exploitation, I guess like our two terms are different because it's like if we agree on something, I wouldn't call that inherently exploitative so long as you hold in your deal and I hold up my end of the deal. I guess like if I wasn't getting paid for like 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks, and then I would call that exploitative.
well, there's different degrees of it, aren't there? It's like
Yeah.
to use an analogy, like one person could fall over and cut their arm, another person could fall over and break their arm. One of those is more painful and damaging than the other, but they're both still injuries. They're both still examples of pain being caused to the body. And so the fact that there is worse exploitation than what happens in your working life and in my working life and in most people in the West's working life, compared to, I think Ace's internet has dropped out. So I'm hopefully he'll be back in a second. I'm sure it won't be too long. A minor technical glitch, I'm sure. In the meantime, there's an element of just whilst we wait for Ace, the idea that we're what I was sort of saying there, right? Like things come in orders of flavor and magnitude. Like something being worse elsewhere doesn't change it from being bad here. And if anything, we want to sort of make that cause and effect link to this sort of thing, right? Like the things that make it worse elsewhere are directly connected to that. We'll get onto it in a second. Ace is back anyhow.
Hey, sorry about that. I didn't mean to do that. I was just
right.
I was just checking the comments and I kind of pressed the wrong button.
Internet issues happen everywhere. No, it's not the end of the world if your internet goes out sometimes.
Go after the injury parts. One person.
Yes, yeah. So two people can have an injury and one is worse than the other, but they're still both injuries. And so people can be exploited, and some exploitation can be more severe and obvious than others, but it's still exploitation. So in your example, oil companies or fossil fuel organizations make billions. People at the top of those companies are extremely wealthy, often billionaires who have significant control in not only their own industry, but in politics, in media, in large parts of the operations of the world, basically. But they wouldn't have that without the labor of people like yourself. Because if there isn't someone there painting machines and operating the logistics and functioning parts of the machine, the oil can't be drilled or mined or whatever, and the company can't function. So they need your labor, but they don't have to compensate you fully. They don't have to give you the full value of said labor, i.e., a democratic or equivalent portion of the proceeds that would give everyone sort of more democratic say, because they know that if you don't accept the terms they've given you, i.e., working for whatever salary they've determined, they can find someone else, and you'll have to find a way to pay rent and pay for your food and all the other things that are priced out of our reach in the market elsewhere. So even when it's not as obvious as like the worst visions of slavery we can imagine, there is still that implicit force that the market is conducted by, which is that ultimately, if you're not in the capitalist class, if you're not wealthy enough to own the means of production, then you accept labor conditions which don't let you escape conditions which they can profit from. You have no choice but to accept. And whilst it's not as though it's as black and white as like someone grueling away down in the mines versus factory owner with a big top hat and such, it's still the same transaction, the same interaction that's taking place between the two groups, just sort of evolved to be with the current times. Hello?
Yeah, I'm still here. I'm just.
Is your stream? You can hear me like as I'm speaking and such, right? Like you
Yeah,
can.
I can hear you.
Okay. So yeah. Did that make sense? Like there's.
I'm just like thinking about how to
Oh, I see.
respond.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. No problem.
Cause I mean, I know it's really hard to convince the other side of, of like your side's wrong, my side's right. It's really hard to convince them. I'm just trying to think of something
Well,
that'll really
rather
get
than
you
see.
on board. What you
What?
saying?
Sorry. I,
Yeah, I'm
I
just
was
trying
gonna
to.
say something. I think I cut you off. What did you say?
Yeah, I'm just trying to find an argument that'll get you more on my side, and I know
Well,
that's hard to do. Get get people on your side that think like completely different.
well, it's not that because I understand what you're saying, right? Like I get when
Yeah.
at the start when you were talking about free trading and sort of not being compelled to do things and such. Like they're principles that everyone can get behind, but we've got to
Hmm.
think about, because it's not as though under an alternative system that couldn't take place. You can still in a different system make something and trade it with someone else. But what we're doing is thinking more critically about how things are made, because ultimately it's not like a video game where you have complete control and your actions alone decide what happens. We're all part of
Hmm.
vast networks in society that produce us co-constituently, produce us cooperatively. There's a with anything in life, it's not just one person that's produced it. Even the smartest, most intelligent, most fantastic mind relies on the labor of others to realize their ideas. And so, because of that, we want a world where, because everyone's part of it, because we all are human, we should all have our needs met. We should all be able to participate democratically. And through that, we can really improve the way our societies function. Because capitalism is a system that's been around for in sort of informal form for 250 years or so, but the power structures that capitalism is sort of organized around have existed for a lot longer. The feudal system is sort of what capitalism came out of. So we've got a long history of these unjust hierarchical systems being in place. So when we're criticizing capitalism, we're also criticizing the kind of power structures that allow certain groups to dominate over others. We want the whole point of being left wing, and why I would say quite proudly that I'm left wing, is because I want a world where everyone is able to enjoy life, where everyone's able to, yeah, at the very least, eat a decent meal every day and go to sleep in a bed that's warm and not have to worry about some critical health condition which should be easily solved. Like things which we can achieve tangibly, materially, but aren't able to be achieved because of the vast inequalities our system produces. And ultimately, that system is a capitalist one because people have decided for profit to withhold things we need to survive.
Yeah, no, like I definitely want that too. You know, I want everyone to, you know, be in a warm bed, have a home, have a good, decent job. Um, not to worry about things, but yeah, I want all of that too, but I just don't think that socialism, like it, I just still don't think it's the answer though.
Well, to answer that, I suppose, would you say that right now things are okay? Because like you just said, like, and I'm glad that you said that. You want people to
Mhm.
be in a good place and such because it's a good thing to. You'd be surprised, but unfortunately, some people aren't as pleasant about that sort of stuff, right? Like, it is good for everyone to be able to have human rights and be able to have a decent life, but there's something a bit wrong with our current system, right? Because it's not as though the food that people aren't eating doesn't exist. If you walk down any street in a city, you'll find a shop full of food, tons of food, so much food that you'd
Yeah.
be unable to eat it by yourself. But it just sits there on a shelf behind a price. And there's people right on the street outside that can't eat it, even though they're starving. Like,
Mhm.
does that not raise a question mark for you? Does that not sort of raise an eyebrow?
No, I mean that always should raise an eyebrow.
So then what
Um,
can we do to change that then? Like what's the reason we can't say, okay, let's fix this obvious let's fix this problem with an obvious solution? What's the thing that stops us from doing that?
well, I would say, but let me see. I would personally say like, well, we need to fix what's going on in government first. Um,
But I mean we can, but let's just think about this specific point. There's a person on the like let's a thought experiment. You and I are walking down at the city centre. I, I I'm in the UK. We'll use London as the example, right? We're in London. We're
yeah,
walking down the street, you and I, and we walk past. We don't have Walmart, but we have Asda, we have Tesco, we have shops like that. Do you have Tesco in the US? Do you have?
I never heard of
Yeah,
that spot.
ever heard of Tesco? We'll go for Asda then. Asda is Walmart own Asda, so we'll go for Asda. We walk past Asda and it's full of food, full of clothes, full of all the stuff you'd want to buy at any point in your life. Um,
Hmm.
and right outside Asda is someone who's homeless, and they've got their all their possessions in the world are right there on the street with them, and it's just like a coat and a bag and such. But they are really hungry. They've not eaten since the previous day, and they're having a really rotten time. Now, there's food right on the other side of a glass window to them. Why can't they eat that food?
Well, I think it all comes down to like what I asked you earlier. Like, if it's a right, I mean, I should be able to go into your home and eat your food.
But as does not
'Cause-
my home, as does not anyone's home. It's a shop, big shop
Yeah,
too.
no, but again, like, you bought the food with your money, and through trades, they got that supermarket got the money, bought the food, and they want to sell it. I
But
think the best thing to do is, if we see a homeless person, go buy him some food. Go try to help them out the best of our ability.
but in that situation, we still had to buy the food from the shop controlling it. But more importantly, and also the one person would be lucky if it was just one person. There's thousands of homeless
Yeah.
people. Not everyone can buy them the food. Not everyone's going to be able to buy them the food. But more importantly, is it right that this is the way it has to be done? That someone could starve on the other side of a glass window to all the food in the world, basically, like every single item of nutrition you could ever want in your life. Is that right? Just because Asda says it's theirs?
I mean, the other alternative would be just to go up in there and steal the food and go have something to eat.
But should that be the way people have to live their life? Stealing?
No.
Well, I agree. Stealing's not okay. So then let's rewind back in time a little bit before the food gets to the shop. Let's go back to, say, the people on the farm who grew the fruit, for instance. Now, these workers clearly are very important because they are literally cultivating the plants and crops that everyone relies on to eat. But they are extremely underpaid. Often, they are people who are immigrants who are given visas which aren't particularly kind to them. They have to basically stay on the farm for quite a long time for quite a minimum wage, often sometimes not even minimum wage. But because they are in a precarious economic situation, they are basically having to accept these conditions. When Asda buys food from a agricultural producer, they aren't buying it from the workers who actually made the fruit grow and made it able to be a mass-produced item of food. They're buying it from another corporation who have similarly underpaid these workers and then sell the food on for a much higher price than they paid these workers to make a profit. And then Asda or whatever retailer, high street shop, will sell it for an even higher price to us. And because it's got that higher price, because there's been so many steps from the food being grown to the food being sold in the shop, that higher price not only puts it out of reach of the homeless person, but basically ensures there's no alternative but to continue their sort of control of the system of food production, allowing them to continue this extortion of resources from the people actually producing it. And so I would put to you that through the market and its conditions, the corporation has instead been the one to have stolen the fruit, or in this case, the literal fruit. Actually, the corporation has stolen it from the workers.
Like, one thing I did forget to mention earlier, I think it's like another very important concept of capitalism. It's
Yeah,
what's that called? Competition. Because you are right. If like one or two companies, they hold a monopoly. It is going to be more than likely pricier than if we had, I don't know, 12 supermarkets spanning I don't know, 15 miles. Um, and with competition, and that does drive prices down because you have more people selling the same goods and service.
In practice, so in principle, that sounds nice, right? Like, because you're right. In theory, to out compete others, you would want to have people all sort of trying to make the best product you can and selling it less than the maximum price to be able to draw in more customers. But we forget that the capitalist system isn't really one about the flawless, most efficient economy, but of power. The best interest of the capitalist isn't to have competition because they want to be the dominant force of capital. Like, they want to be the biggest fish in the pond. So, time and time again, we see people in these positions, in these sort of positions of wealth and such, shut down competition, buy up the competition, turn it into a branch of itself. I said a second ago, Asda was bought by Walmart. Well, shops in the UK and the US and everywhere buy up competing stores of a small scale
I
because
think you
they know.
froze up on
Sorry?
AO.
What, sorry? Hello? Can you hear me, Ace? Hello?
Hey, you froze up on me.
Oh no. What was the last thing you heard?
Um, just start back on like the competition
Yeah,
about
okay, okay.
one company wants to like buy out another company and such.
Yes, okay, yeah. So the competition that we see is shut down by existing capitalists because of their market interests. They want to make the most money, and so it's against their interest to let there be competition. And so part of this is just the natural working of the system, right? Like, they the whole point is that you accumulate as much capital as you can. So through market logics, you would naturally see the not as good businesses, not be able to compete as such. But as we see, capitalists put measures in place to preserve their own power, be it through buying out competition or using their economic capital to convert into other forms of capital, political capital, cultural capital, to be able to ensure their views and here their market power remains considerably high. But critically, I think we're not quite like the idea that competition exists is one I think most people would agree with. It's good to not have things dominated by certain parties, but it's not something which capitalism is going to be able to give us, because ultimately the market doesn't exist for people to have the best chance in it and such. The market exists because capitalist structures need it in order to make a profit. So, in order for the labor relations to happen, you've got to have that um, tool of power through the unfair trades that make up the everyday. So, to return us to our friends on the street, they are falsely given a choice between different, because as you say, there's not as though it's just Walmart, there's other shops too, but these shops
Mm-hmm.
are all in the same category of exploitation. They all still put a price on their food and the other essentials you need, and the person can't access it unless they agree to these conditions. And if you can't agree, then the system says too bad. you know, like if I think if the people in today's society don't really have the ability to fix the homeless situation, right? Because if you buy food for one homeless person, well, what made that person more deserving than the 100 other people on the same stretch of road that are also needing help to eat and such, right? Like, there's nothing that makes Tom more deserving of your charity than John or Susan or whomever. But
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that.
exactly. But then the solution then is to say, okay, there's something fundamentally wrong in a system that lets random people starve when there's food right there, which we could give, but because it's a private property of the capitalists, we don't. It's you got to pay for it, otherwise it's too bad. Like that isn't okay. That's not a good way to run a society. Wouldn't you agree?
I mean, I agree that like we should have more generosity. Like we should help people in need, but like
But it
it,
shouldn't be just generosity. Like you shouldn't. It should be something that's guaranteed, right? Like it should be. Um, it isn't efficient to rely on people sort of amending it after a fact. It should be something that we systemically alter by looking at how it gets to its stage in the first place. Like you shouldn't have to rely on chance basically to eat.
see, but like if it should be a guarantee, hypothetically, if I go out in the woods, I'm going to have to put in effort to find fruits, berries, or I'm gonna have to put in effort to um, catch livestock, to cook it, make sure it's safe, make sure it's good for consumption. Um, and it's like if I go out in the woods, there is no guarantee that I am going to find any fruits, berries, or any live game to catch. I mean, is that too like exploitative? Because I mean, it should be like guaranteed.
But I don't quite understand what your point is there. I mean, I'm not trying to be facetious or mean or anything like that. I don't. What is the argument there that you're making with that statement?
Um. So I think like the point of the matter is we all gotta put in work and effort to eat, to have a comfortable living, to get the stuff we want and need. Um, just it given to us. I mean, I think that that'll just make us weaker as a society, not a
It's
stronger
given
society.
it's given to capitalists right now. I mean, what you just said yourself, like a person that's actually trying to find. Well, I mean, it's not really finding food anymore because we're sort of more developed as a species now, right? But the people who are managing and develop and growing the food are doing that hard work and being paid peanuts, whilst the person at Walmart is sat on a empire of billions, and they aren't doing the work. They aren't anywhere near the day-to-day regular management of the systems they're in charge of. They probably couldn't even tell you what half this food was, to be honest. Like, so the idea that that you're worried about, if we don't work hard, we're not going to go anywhere as a species. All that's the people in charge right now aren't working hard. They're exploiting all our labor. They're benefiting from the poverty and the starvation we were discussing earlier in order to have their billions. And just imagine if, instead of having to juggle around, okay, where's my rent coming from? Where are my bills coming to be paid by? Like, what am I going to eat today? Because I can only afford so much. If we didn't have to stress and worry about that in such high magnitude and order, we could do so much more and have that societal growth that we're talking about.
So like, well, like, uh, let's take your system per se. I don't want to put any words in your mouth. But like, I take it that you would give, in your society, give everyone free food and all.
Yeah, like food would be something accessible to all, and it's not as though you aren't able to have access to food now, like physically, but we're prevented economically because of the capitalist structures. So it would be a fairly straightforward switch, right? Because you would, for instance, use the existing physical space that the shop is today, the Walmart, the Asda, Tesco, whatever, and instead of having it as like a profitable business venture, you'd have it as a food mart. Okay, I'm going to go for my weekly shop. I'm going to take what I need, and then I can then go and eat it. So yes, like it's something which you'd be able to have as a human right, guaranteed.
So basically, like, I go to this corner, I'm able to. What's stopping me from taking more than what I need?
Why would you take more than what you need? In a capitalist system, you might do that because you want to sell it on for a profit. You want to try and gain a foothold in society, or just because you need to try and find some extra money from somewhere because the impending threat of homelessness and starvation and not being able to be on the market anymore is hanging over you. In this system, where suddenly you aren't scrabbling around trying to make ends meet, why would you take more than what you need?
I mean, it is free. I mean,
Yeah, but
I
what would be
mean,
your incentive though? Like, why would you need to? Because
I
that's
guess
what drives.
no one really needs a reason to grab more than what they need to.
But they do in this current system. Like the reason people steal and take and such in this system is because it's if you have more money and resources, then you can do more in society. Like if you want to, if someone that goes into a shop and takes like 5 phones secretly, I mean, it doesn't happen as much as people claim it does, but like the hypothetical person that's taken like 5 phones off a shelf and dashing out the store does so because they feel the risk of being caught is less than the reward of being able to sell those phones for cheap on the black market or whatever, and having lots of disposable income ready to then spend on their next set of bills, the food they need to eat, etc. It's something that is predicated on the market rewarding those who have more money and resources. In a system in which you didn't have that gratification and survival, basically, of having to have these resources, why would you bother taking more than what you needed? Like, what are you going to do with it?
I don't know. I mean, maybe just cause, you know.
But okay, but most people, like people who steal just because, are vastly outnumbered by those who steal because of the economic demands and rewards of it. Like people, like kleptomania is a thing, but it's not very common, and it's certainly less common than economic uh, incentivized theft. And crucially, like wouldn't even really be an issue because like if someone like no one's going to be taking like I don't know 50% of the store in one go, which ironically is what happens right now under our current system, just again tacitly through the market.
Hey, I'm gonna have to go for right now. Can we see about catching up on this conversation a little bit later?
Sure, absolutely, why not?
All right, sorry about
But
that, by the way.
no, not at all, not at all. You know, just send me a message. I'll chat about stuff here for a moment.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
send me a message. We'll do part 2 another time. Don't worry about it.
Okay, okay. This is a just as an ending goodbye. I really did it. I really do appreciate this conversation. Uh, definitely looking to come back. You've been a generous host.
Well,
I really do respect you a lot.
that's very nice of you, Ace. It was a pleasure talking, and like I say, we'll get something together. We'll try and sort out a time for us to continue this. But yeah, you take care. All the best, Ace.
All right. God bless everyone. Peace out.
Okay, so that is, I guess, the end of the debate section of the of this stream. I suppose I can reflect a little bit on what's been said here. You know, the way that Ace is talking about these systems, I think, is really interesting because you can tell that there's an element of wanting justice to happen and wanting things to be better for people and such. But at the same time, it's fundamentally contradicted by everything that the capitalist system is. Even what we just ended on there, right? Like the idea that um, uh, people would take more than what they need. That's right now. That's our current system, right? Like any world where someone has $1 billion or a billion of anything and someone else is starving is the taking more than what you need. But because it's abstracted through the market, because it's something that isn't tangible, like we would see if someone physically did this in a shop, makes it hard to spot and makes it something which I suppose is embedded, and suppose why the capitalist system, you know, is so tricky to unpiece from our minds a little bit for a lot of people. Thank you very much, Robin. By the way, I'm glad that you feel I did well. It was a nice conversation. You know, I mean, Ace. I don't know if there was the internet connections having a little bit of an issue, but you know, Ace, you know, seemed nice enough. You know, talking about things that are ultimately what we all interact with, and everyone's got their own perspective. But it's fascinating that you know the sort of capitalist system is so entrenched for a lot of people that the alternative is almost repositions to have the problems the current system currently has. Um, and you can really see it. You can really feel it when we touch on, as we did a second ago or a few minutes ago, rather, the idea of you know, homelessness. Um, Someone who literally has a problem that's fixable physically, like the solution to someone not having a home or someone starving, is actually quite simple. Put them indoors in a place they can sleep and feed them. And you can do that in any single urban area on the planet really quickly. But socially, the social constraints of capitalism stop us from doing this. Because if you were to go into the shop and say, hey, this guy needs a place to sleep, we need to give him some food, they wave the cash machine at you. Right, you're going to pay for it, you're going to pay. If you can't, get lost, or we're going to call the police. And I suppose we didn't touch on that when Ace was talking about the NAP, the non-aggression principle. I mean, it's farcical that someone could see the police and the way that people engage with the sheer force of the capitalist structure. The fact that if you try and broach the conditions you are forced to be in, you'll be met with a reaction from the states of capitalism. The idea there's no force is a major problem. An upside down world, yeah, I agree. It's people. It is shocking, but I suppose when you're used to it, it's harder to identify. As with anything, right? Like if you wouldn't realize you had an accent unless you were with people that didn't share your accent. As I realized when I'm, you take for granted people having British accents. Obviously, everyone's got, Britain's quite diverse in terms of vernacular sounds, so it's a bit different. But even so, you enjoyed the centrist guy last week. Yeah, no, he was a nice person to talk to. It was quite a productive conversation. I also quite enjoyed it. The last few conversations have been quite nice, actually. I think I had some interesting ones a little while ago, and I say interesting, I mean just unpleasant. The sort of neoliberally ones were a bit weird, but it's hit and miss. I like to think this research project, this finding people and sort of people finding me a lot of the time, as with today's person Ace. It can make for some interesting conversations, but at the same time, it's, I think, interesting that so frequently people touch on the same sorts of themes of control and power and justice, and have settled on a system which ultimately doesn't deliver any of the, doesn't deliver any kind of justice and upholds the power they're talking about. Perhaps next time we'll talk a little bit about the nature of the system, the idea that when you want to talk about what gives you freedom, it's not being trapped in in wage labor, right? Like it's not having to sell your labor to be able to afford things you need to survive. I mean, interestingly, actually, that was one thing I wanted to touch on more. Actually, he said that food was not a human right, and that's interesting because I think America and I want to say the state of Israel were the only two when this was when the UN voted on this a resolution. Let me try and find the actual image of this. Let's have a look. Food as human right, UN votes. Let's have a look. Can I show this quickly? I'm certain I can. Yeah, here we go. I've done this via Paint, so it's never the smoothest. Why am I so bad at? Right, here we go. Right, share. So there we go. Like, make food a human right. Make food a human right. Easiest thing in the world to vote for, right? Like, surely everyone can see that. Apart from America, apart from Israel, and what's this here, like the Congo and such, and a few other nations, I think, compiled into a few, but they didn't vote. They didn't even vote against it. They didn't vote at all. The right to adequate food is realized when every man, woman, and child, alone or in community with others, has physical and economic access at all times to adequate food or means for its procurement. Now, this to me seems like such an easy thing to try and like just acknowledge in society. And I think even it's not as though these countries that have voted yes aren't also flawed and capitalistic. But clearly, they have gone the basic human step, taken the basic human step of saying, okay, yeah, people should eat because we need to eat to survive. But America, in its capitalistic ways, its more than capitalistic sense, said it wasn't. And for exactly the reason Ace was saying earlier, it infringes on the right of free trade and capital and the expanse of power. And when we have a capitalist system, ultimately, we lose out on that basic recognition of human condition, of human rights. And it's scary because, I would like to think that if I ever was unfortunate enough to end up in such a precarious state that I was on the streets and starving, or either or, right? Because plenty of people have a home but don't eat regularly, and plenty of people are eating enough but don't have a permanent place to call their home. I would hope that society would help me out. But in a system that is all about making money and bettering yourself over others, that is pushed to the sideline. The person that wants to help out is someone that doesn't really, consider the economics. The person who doesn't want to help others has the chance of being a better capitalist on the system, and that's how you get Walmart's, putting essential food items under lock and key in those horrible little plastic containers that you have to get scanned at the checkout to be released. Versus the rest, like it's not good. Interestingly, Robin, we're raised to be very selfish in spite of our Christian population. You're absolutely right that we have a selfish, individualistic culture. I think that Christianity, or sort of the organized Protestant puritanical sense of it, did focus quite a lot on the self and on that sort of rather right-wing interpretation, because as with many things, the capitalist system is one of cultural dominance as well as economic dominance, right? Like we're not just thinking about the system in terms of monetary transactions. It's also a mindset, right? Like the idea that people who are calling themselves Christian, who are meant to in Jesus' name help others and such, then turn around and say, no, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, don't rely on the government, we're going to trade amongst ourselves. There's a contradiction there, but not when we consider that the religions of the world, here Christianity, have been influenced by these power structures, and thus those who've taught Christianity, or many of them, are really preaching from a place of how do I consolidate my own power, right? Like Jesus spent time literally going into according to the Gospels and whatever, like going into churches and temples and saying, hey, how come you've got all this money when there's homeless people outside? Why is it that you are extremely wealthy traders and merchants when there's people who are barely able to eat every day? Jesus didn't, when he fed the 5,000 on the hilltop, he didn't say, "Oh, pay up a fee, please. This is my private property." He just did it anyway. But here we are in America, where you've got majority Christian population. Is it still majority population? Probably close to that. Certainly in government now, right? Like the current GOP are very much a theocratic party at this point. They want to very much make America right-wing, white supremacist, Christian, etc. And they don't come close to what Jesus did. They don't come close to the sort of values of love thy neighbor. Nowhere close to be found. But no, it's silly. It's very silly. I think that as a society, the best steps we can take to fixing our social problems will be amending the right-wing steps we've taken. And we're seeing that, I think, now more than ever with the current lurch to fascism, which is, it's scary, but it can be done. And the roots to all of it is in tackling the capitalist ethic and mindset and economic structures that are at the center of our planet and its regular activities, because it's not good. it isn't good for our planet to be like this. And be it warfare and violence, be it the devastating condition of homeless people and hungry people, be it the basic injustice of denying those who produce the world's goods a fair say in the fruits of their labor. There's many injustices that need to be tackled, and I think as Ace has gone and my voice is starting to go, I will probably leave it there. Thanks everyone who did listen, and those who listened on repeats. Hopefully, Ace and I will sort out a time, or Ace will get back to me, and we'll continue this again and touch on things. And yeah, thanks everyone for listening. Take care all.